I ditched the camera. Oh, no. It's still... Oh, man, I just don't get this at all. Alright, fuck this shit. Welcome to Art of Rock. I don't even know what button to push, because I'm just that together. Found it. Welcome to Art of Rock. Thank you for joining us. It's Saturday morning. I think my mic's working. We do this every Saturday. Boom, right there. Join us for Art of Rock. And something really important, I would just want to say for Thanksgiving, thank you to the Tongva people, who are the indigenous people of Los Angeles, and I thank them for their resilience and for surviving. Thank you for surviving. This is made possible by Angelspit's Patreon. Hey, if you want to tip me $3 a month to keep me going, there. And I guarantee you'll get lots of smart arsery and all that sort of fun stuff. But you'll get to fling smart arsery back, as Mark is always flinging smart arsery back. New single, go get it. It's on Bandcamp. It's with Queen of the Static Opera. It's just terrifying madness. I just also did a track with Bet Noir from Grim Life of a Hack. It's on Spotify. Go listen to it. The response has been really good on that. I'm so excited. There's more tracks I want you to know about on Spotify right now. Go there, like that. Many of the bands are here. And as always, MTV TV. There it is. After here, we're going to rate to MTV TV. I want you to keep it in your likes folder. We're always going to go to MTV TV. It is excellent. I'm just looking at the stuff behind me, and it's a mess. Studio is a fucking disaster. But MTV TV is not a disaster. It's amazing. So, like that shit. And if you've got a video, send it to them, and they will play it. I'm going to start the day by... Actually, Mark, you had a wonderful question. Let's go there first.
Sure. So my question is, do people really have a strong opinion on soft synths versus emulations of... soft synths that are emulations of existing hardware synths? Like, obviously people are going to say, well, I prefer buttons, or I prefer the convenience of being able to go anywhere with it and not worry about, like, dropping it or something. But I guess I'm mostly asking if you have strong opinions on, like, the sound differences. Because, like, me personally, I have a Juno emulation, although smaller, and, I mean, I have not seen an actual Juno, but I don't care, I guess, for trying to get the exact sound of Blank. I'm just curious if anyone else had strong opinions, really.
Can I go first? I was offered a Juno 106 for $200 in 1992. I was offered a Juno 60 for I think $50. And I was offered a Drum Tricks, a 606 and a 303 together for $200, and I got him down to $150, and I walked away from him. I was an idiot, and they were all in the early 90s. Anyway, there you go. Look, as you know, I'm a wanker and a snob, but ultimately, I want you to make your music. And it's like, ultimately, can you really hear the difference? Like, can some kid on the floor, or adult, or old man, or old woman, or person, and I don't want to get too far into the age of that person, but unless they're popping and locking some moves. Have you guys seen that new move people are doing? It's so dumb. It really it makes me feel like such an old man. It's like my Twitter feed, I'll get to Softsynths. Fuck off. My hashtags I follow is powwow. Mark, welcome. Powwow, indigenous peoples, kit bashing, NASA, and synthesizers, and then this fucking dance has turned up, and it's like, oh my god, it's horrible. If you look around, you'll find it, and you go, these people are stomping and kicking their legs, and it's so dumb. It hurts my skull. More importantly, so I don't fucking care, really. Like, if somebody, no one's going to hear the difference. No one is going to hear the difference. Maybe they will. Actually, in some cases, they probably will. But fucking, like, ultimately, I prefer hard synths because they're fun, and playing with knobs is fun, and you can do it away from the computer. Like, you can sit yourself in the corner and turn the Emacs on and create something. I like that. I am blessed that I am in an opportunity to do that. I love just creating a sound and going, I wonder if I'll use this. Months later, years later, I end up using it or not. But ultimately, the most important thing, besides my biased, bigoted fucking wank, which I'm not even going to go down because you all know, is make music. And I don't care what you make it with. And if I ever chew you out for using Softsynths, I permit you to tell me to bugger off, Carl. You're a wanker. You're allowed to say that. Alex.
So I think that you have to differentiate between is it different to the person who's listening and the person who's making music. I think to the person who's listening, it's not you can't distinguish it in any way. At least I can't. If it's a good emulation, of course, you can just throw some stuff together and it sounds nothing like a Juno or something. But I think if you're interacting with it, sometimes real analog hardware has a tendency to be weird. And the software emulations tend to stay in a certain area that works great for making music. So sometimes it can be better, because sometimes you just turn up your gear, at least it's my experience, and it's just not the same. And you don't know why. And sometimes that can be a problem, because you're trying to get a certain sound and it just doesn't work. And when you try the same thing the next day, it suddenly works again. So there is that. It has a benefit and a drawback. I think real analog hardware tends to be more wild to a certain degree, but that's not always a good thing. Maybe a personal experience, there's an emulation of the DAW modules by Softtube, and I can't hear the difference if I'm listening to a recording. But of course it feels so much different tweaking real knobs than pushing sliders on the computer screen. But sonically, I can't distinguish the two. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, man. I found the raise hand thing for me. Ivan.
So, I enjoy both, hardware and software. When I'm doing sound design, that's when hardware really shines, because everything's mapped already. And it just works. With the VSTs, you're either using your mouse or you're trying to find that magical controller that does it well. And I have yet to find that controller. It just, they don't. I end up not liking all of them, and I've got a number of choices. But for playing and sound design, hardware controller, hardware synths, they're amazing because everything's just there right in front of you, and you just reach up and touch it, which is great. Thing is, we're getting ramped up to the point where we're going to be taking our we're going to actually be playing live shows, and the last thing in the world that I want to be dealing with is set up and tear down for a live show with a bunch of hardware synths. Last thing I want to deal with is packing and unpacking to go do a live show with hardware synths. The last thing I want to deal with in the world is one of those breaking out in the wild. I mean, like my massively irreplaceable Alita. I don't know where I could get parts for it, and so but I like using it, and that's always going to end up having to live as part of a backing track. And then I've got the D50 and the M1 and stuff, and they're great, but I don't want to take them out on the road and get them broken, because shit's going to happen. Beers are going to get spilled. Dirty power is going to happen.
Beers are going to get spilled.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is much safer to just take a off the shelf controller or two along, and run that into play some VSTs, because VSTs, the closest they're going to get to breaking is they're going to crash, and then you restart them and everybody's happy. Or God help you, something happens to your notebook. We can have a bigger discussion about how to get around that. And here's the thing is, people are listening to MP3s. By the time it's been compressed down to play on Spotify or as an MP3, all that character that you would have expected to be the difference between a VST and hardware, it's compressed away. It's gone. You're not going to be able to tell the difference. Also, most people are listening to their music with the speaker here. That like these. This is at best gonna sound. It sounds horrible. So use the tools that work, and more importantly, and I'm with Carl on this one. The better. The more important thing between hardware or software is just go make music. I mean, that's actually the point. All right, I've said all I can.
Thank you, Ivan. Red!
One of the things that comes to mind with this is that there's this continuity between the historical original articles of some of these monster synths, the classics, and that gets lost a little bit in the emulations, and we don't have a cultural knowledge of exactly which ones succeed in preserving some of the spirit of the originals. I mean, there's good 3D interfaces, and there's good audio emulations, and there's good they sound like the originals, but the one thing that we lose in that there's very few people that are going to be custodians of the entire pantheon of the god synthesizers in life and make those actual comparisons to see what are we actually missing with this, what is different about the emulation, what is a complete failure. And there's some reviews, and people on the forums certainly discuss this stuff, but placing, as Ivan was saying, we want to be able to touch all these synths. We want to be able to hear all these synths. We want to be able to use them. And having this just sparked my idea for a reliable way of getting our hands on some of these things, whether it's museum style or open studio style, or just knowing people, some sort of pool of, peer accessibility to every synth ever made. It's a little bit of a utopian dream, but it just sort of came to mind in that carrying forth that actual legacy of what these, big and difficult to construct and hard to carry and hard to access and aging and disappearing original articles meant.
Thank you. That's a really interesting point, because I got to tell you, I've never heard a software synth that sounds like an ARP 2600. That really sounds like an ARP 2600 sounds like a truck that's driving really fast and it's rattling apart, and it's great. Same with an MS-20, and it's also the same with a Mini Moog. I've never really, and they're really good. And it's really interesting is that, okay, at what point does a Mini Moog not, it's like we're having a conversation with somebody and they died, but replacing them is their AI, which no one can tell the difference is, because nobody actually knew the person in the first place. And the person says all the things and has the sense of humor, but they don't have the same smell, and they don't burp the same way. And there's all of these other little tiny things that the AI got rid of, like the way they burp, the way they fart, the way they scratch themselves, the way they flick their snot across the room, that sort of shit. And then somebody else does an AI, and then somebody else, and before you know it, it's not really that person anymore. It is all of these people coming together, deciding what is the most iconic thing about that person. I own 2 Jupiter 8s, and they don't sound the same. I know I have a bunch of friends who own multiple Mini Moogs and multiple Prophet 5s and fucking, especially MS-20s. They don't sound the same. None of them. I have a theory for why that is, and that is because a lot of the components, the actual boards, they weren't laser etched. They were dipped in fucking acid baths, and there's heaps of imperfections in there. And there's parts in it where you look at, oh, they didn't make the right connection there, so we'll just, fix it up. How are you going to emulate that? The other thing about it is it doesn't really care. We're getting into the thing now. Do you want some amazing fine red wine, or do you want wine out of a bag? Does it even matter? Because most people haven't had that fine red wine. And when you have that fine red wine, it's like, this tastes like ass. I fucking hate this shit. It tastes like ass and dirt. And it's got great legs. It tastes like dirt. And that's the thing, is that I used to listen to Jupiter 8 emulations, and it's like, this is better than a Jupiter 8. But then you push further into it, and it's like, But the point is, once again, just use the music. And if you're lucky enough to have, because, the thing about old synths, oh no, here we go. And is that there are a whole bunch of chaos that's just held together with wire and smart people hoping for the best. When Dave Smith made a synthesizer, he had no idea what it would sound like. No idea. There's this article, an interview with him, and he goes, I had no idea. We just thought, if we put these bits and pieces together, they're going to sound good. Same with the Moog. Something happened. It was wrong. It was way overdriven. That sounds cool. Let's go with that. Sure, how do you emulate that? Who fucking cares? But the point is that actually creating sound, like, listen, this is funny, man, because when I was in uni and rave was happening and the 909 was everywhere, as it still is, I remember listening to the first generation of rave that came out. And I was fucking listening to that. There was a radio show, I'd listen to this radio show, and it was a 909. And I could tell it was a 909 because the university had an MX2, and it had straight up 909 samples. I knew what they sounded like. But about 3 months later, they were changing. And what was happening is that, I really like S Expresses. I like the KLFs 909. Everybody likes the KLFs 909. I'm going to sample it. No, Resi. Everybody likes the KLFs 909. I'm watching you. And then you hear the KLFs 909, and then it was Orb, then it was fucking Moby, blah 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 blah, and they'd sample it, compress it a bit, add a bit more gate, butter, until you ended up with this sound that sounded like a cannon fire, and it was a 909, and then you'd go back to a 909 and go click, and it was. It's like, wow. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's once again, pointing out what Resi said, is that the original person is dead and gone. No one knew the person, but his 30 AIs that are the best thing that person added, and we fixed a few bits as well. I don't know what I'm saying, but when you sound design with chaos, it's the best fucking thing. Like Ivan said, if you wanna. I guess that's another thing that I don't like about Softsynths. Maybe because I don't have the patience. With a real synthesizer, you make mistakes. And yes, you do on a Softsynth too. Oh, what does that do? I guess the trick is, don't read the manual. Don't click the help button. Figure it out. But I've just found that, yeah, and also I will say, nothing cuts through a mix like a fucking genuine, an 8-bit sample of a Lin drum or a SB12 drumulator. Nothing cuts through the mix. I listen to the modern versions of them and it's like, no, dude, it doesn't fucking hit it. They sound great, but anyway, there's just something about chaos and trash, blah, blah, blah. I'm done now. Alex, tell me I'm wrong.
So I think at a certain point you also have to ask yourself the question, does my music really need the emulation of a 40 to 50-year-old instrument? Because I think like we have so many great modern instruments that are really readily available, that sometimes you can just take that, for example, like I think like in a way Massive and Serum are like the equivalent of a Jupiter 8 in our time, because they are really popular and also really good sounding. And maybe there's something out there that's totally unknown that works really great for you. So I think you don't really have to look up to these instruments as the holy grail, because I think there's much great synthesis to be found in our time, and the instruments that we can buy right now that are coming out new. Yeah, also I think a great mixture of both is when you have real synthesizers that can be a control surface for software. I think Omnisphere has a mode where you can control it with certain hardware synthesizers, and I think Arturia came out with some keyboard that has the same feature, where they have like a software emulation of their hardware that is the same structure and almost the same sound, where you can use the hardware to control the software and then save it with your project or something.
Thanks, man. This is a really valuable point, which I'll talk about later. Vance!
Okay, sorry. Took me a second. Find the mute button again. Yeah, here's the thing. Hardware, software, as it's been mentioned already, once you compress it and you get it down to MP3, like the average person is not going to know the difference. And if you like knobs, there are plenty of controllers with lots of knobs. And not that this is in any way sponsored, I just happened to find this out myself yesterday. Native Instruments right now, with several of their keyboard lines, is giving away their entire software suite at the moment for Black Friday sales. So that gives you a lot of inputs.
Somebody give me the link and I'm going to put it in there right now.
Knobs.
Sorry, Vince, I just stood over you. Could you say that last part again, please?
Okay, which last part?
Oh, you held up a keyboard, and I think you said...
They've got lots of models that have lots of knobs. This has got 8 knobs plus the 9th main control selection directional encoder knob.
The 9th knob.
Like, the big knob. That's literally what it is on the keyboard, but... Yeah, and that's actually what I use for a lot of things, is that keyboard, because it manages everything in the software, because it's matched to the software it came with, and that works out nicely. But I also have this M-Audio key station that I use for other things, because it's bigger. I have a wider range of keys. But I also use a lot of just samples, too, that are not, I don't even bother playing it in. I sample it and add effects, and it ends up sounding like a synthesizer, even when it's not a synthesizer that I've used the sample from. So you've got a lot of options. And for someone like myself, who does not have money for hardware synths, software synths really are a great option, as long as you get a controller for it with the knobs. Like, that's... I agree. I like knobs. Knobs are good, but don't have money for real knobs.
All right, I hear you. I'm going to talk about DEXED later, which is a software synth I've just discovered. Also, if anybody can give me, throw the link, and I put your new track up on the chat, by the way, Vince. If anyone can let me the link to fucking software that's free today, Waves, please let me know, and I'll put that up there as well. Thank you, Vince. Razzie, you just said something really... Oh, yeah. You mentioned checking the MIDI implementation chart at the back and see if it includes Aftertouch. Yeah. You shut up, man. Shut up. But go.
I just... I wanted to circle back a tiny bit and say, emulating the loose component tolerances, it's solved. We've got that. We can make things that are technically as unpredictable as a bad hardware would be, but I like it. It's really feels somewhere deep in my heart about making sure that Carl, what you were talking about is making copies of copies and knowing that generation loss and fidelity from the original is different. And then like 3 people talked about how we've got modern reinterpretations of stuff. Alex, I think you mentioned Massive in particular being a great synth in its own right and doesn't seek to be a 3D rendering photograph version of any of the old synths. But just having that distinction in mind and knowing like where the originals came from, what we've done differently, and holding on to the history accurately. And then Vince, you mentioned using mapped controller knobs, and if you don't mind, could you go into a little bit of detail on your experience and how you do that, and you know, whether it's convenient? I mean, let's say my counter situation is I never reach for a knob that's not permanently mapped to a parameter. I can't usually reliably think, oh, this array of 4x4 is going to be mapped to ADSR. So do you have a habit and skills in that regard?
I do not have a habit, and I would be hard pressed to say I have skills of any kind. But the Native Instruments machine software is really great for that, because there's a drop-down menu that just lets you select how those pre-mapped knobs are set based on what effects you're using. So it just changes the pre-mapping based on the set of effects in that library, or that are designed for that library that it comes with overall. So you go through your whole list of samples in a section, and that list of samples will then have another drop-down menu that gives you an option for a list of effects. And then you set the effect you want on it, and then it maps your knobs to all the things that that effect does. So it's pretty intuitive if you know roughly what things you want to be able to change. But if you've got no experience at all in any of the terminology dealing with a synthesizer, that becomes difficult.
Labels and
trial
such.
and error works great for that, because it comes up with some great stuff even when you don't know what you're doing. So it still works out pretty well.
I want to come back to that after we exhaust this topic, like the idea of not knowing what you're doing and having randomness.
Thank you. Ivan.
So, like using the VSTs, especially doing sound design, my biggest problem is when you're sliding things back and forth with the mouse, like the accuracy on it is not nearly as good as like a physical dial, especially a good dial, or, good pots and good sliders. Get that nice smooth precision going up and down. It's nice, whereas like when you're using the mouse, it jumps ahead kind of fast, or you find yourself trying to cheat and use the wheel and it jumps even faster, or like getting good precision with that just kind of sucks. I did run this for a while, Easy Control 9, which is 9 sliders, 9, and I like to not like it. It's decent. It kind of pisses me off most of the time.
Interesting. Thank you. Was there anything else you wanted to add it, or?
I'm good.
Good. Thank you. This conversation is really inspiring me to fucking try harder. Because I realize I'm stuck in 1982. I'm stuck there and I can't get out. It's really interesting. And I noticed everybody's smile went, 1982. I mean, it was the best of Tom Baker, and the music was great, and the DX7 hadn't ruined everything just yet. But it's interesting that I am absolutely aware that I am, yes. I'm interesting that I'm in this strange rut, and the music I listen to is all from there as well. And I find myself listening to this stuff, even the fucking art. I'm listening to this stuff, and I'm always finding new stuff in there. But that's not a healthy thing. Like, I do listen to a lot of modern music, but I don't know. It's funny that I once, AJ from Echo House, we were bored one night, and he, we challenged each other to, Adam, it's good to see you. we were challenged each other to make some sounds on his fucking whatever the hell it was, Waldorf something, and I was using a K2000, and we were going to try and make this really amazing sound and see who could go better. And in 2 minutes, he just came up with this sound, and I went, "How the fuck did you do that?" And he said, "Oh, well, I'm not using something from 1992." And I went, "You're a bastard." But he was absolutely right. It's an interesting thing, and I think we've got to get more, really... Even when I get modulars, man, all the modulars I have are... none of this shit existed pre-90... it's all fucking 71 to 81 mindset on everything I do. I'm not proud of that. I have to fucking get out of that mindset. Alex...
I think there's some solutions. One is that hopefully will take over as MIDI 2.0, which will just grab the parameters of your VST. That hasn't happened yet, unfortunately. But the others are I think there's a standard by Native Instruments that just displays the names of the parameters you're trying to change. I think it's called NKS or something. I don't know how well it works because I don't have any of the keyboards, but it seems to work from what I've heard. And I think the other company doing something similar is Arturia with their own stuff, and also Nectar with some selection of instruments that are like well known and used. So I think these are some solutions if you're looking for that. I have to admit, I just usually map something, then forget how I mapped it, and just remap it the next time.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Vince!
Yes. On the note of what Ivan was saying about controls being oversensitive or undersensitive with the mouse, there's actually a solution for that I found. I had an issue with general adjustments in my DAW and with synthesizer things with the mouse on the computer, and I spent $30 on this 10,000 DPI gaming mouse. It makes adjustments way easier and more accurate because the mouse cursor doesn't skip a spot ever where you don't want it to, or go further than you want it to. It's a far more accurate mouse technology, so you get a more accurate read on what you're trying to move on your screen.
That's brilliant.
I actually wasn't sure it was going to be a solution. I happened to have a little bit of credit left on an account that I could get one through, and decided to just order one because I'd been struggling, mostly because I don't see real well, and I'm working on a laptop, so I've got a limited amount of screen to zoom in on. If I zoom in too far, things get all pixelated, and then nothing looks right, and I can't see what I'm doing. So I got a fancy mouse, which wasn't that expensive, so I could more accurately navigate everything on my computer and have less issues with visibility, because at least I can see the cursor. I can make that a little bigger, and then I can see the cursor, and I know what I'm doing, and I read the numbers, and I read the cursor. So
that's a really good idea.
Gaming mouse with real sensitive adjustment capabilities. That's my advice there for issues with adjusting things with your mouse.
Thank you very much, Alex.
I just wanted to add, there is like one hardware piece which is just one big knob that controls whatever your mouse hovers over. I forgot what it was called, but
it's probably called Big Knob.
Yep, it's the Mackie Big Knob.
No, I think the big knob is just for controlling your monitors, but there's like a PC and Mac USB device where you can just hover over some control and have like really fine...
The Mackie Big Knob is not just for your monitors. It can control just about anything if you set it to.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it red?
Unfortunately, no.
Fuck
they
that.
They should definitely make a red one.
Yeah, and it needs to say panic. And you hit it and something happens. Besides all notes off.
Yeah, there's a couple different versions of the Mackie Big Knob, and at least one of them has got setting options that you can change what it controls, so you can control just about anything with it.
Everything you just said was sexual.
Yeah, title
He's a
myself.
knob.
I'm sorry, for some reason I was just thinking if Brian was here, this would be a good conversation.
Don't invite Brian. Fucking, that's what everyone always says. Fucking Brian's coming. Like it's.
No, yeah.
That's not a dig at Brian personally.
No, I know.
That's just-
I know. It's called the Brian effect. Brian increases the humor of everything. He is the Weird Al of industrial music. He does have the humorous genius. Vince, were you done, or am I throwing it to Alex? Because I really appreciate what you said.
Yeah, I'm good. Here.
Alex, thank you. What you got?
I just forgot to put my hand down. Sorry.
Happens all the time. Rezi.
Here's what I want. Every time, no, not even every time. I want a hardware control surface, actually, but there's no space for it, and who wants to really actually keep that around the studio? But at least the 5 or 6 main devices that I always call up, I want dedicated and labeled. They don't even have to have OLEDs or anything. They could be silk screened with Q, frequency, and gain. And they don't need like range written on them on the legend. They can just be, but as long as they're labeled, so I can reach for those. And like every time, without selecting in the OS interface, without calling up the graphical representation of it, I can just reach for that, and I know that it's the one that was tethered to that. But now I need like 10 of them or 15 of them because the last few tracks that I'm working on all have the same EQ layout. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what I want, but
And you have to have them around you and a cape.
Absolutely. Splayed out in an arc with streams of God rays coming up from, and I'm on roller skates in this particular dream too.
Yeah, I do.
It plays the Axel Foley theme.
Okay.
I was gonna go Jan Hammer, but that's fine.
Sure. There's a bunch of little kit devices that you can do this kind of stuff with, certainly, and like things like having a MIDI fighter with the knobs, or I think Fader Fox had a few of them, and somebody even made a full emulated, sorry, not emulated, but a control interface for the ESQM, like on a panel, and all it did was control your virtual, or no, your real ESQM, but it was a front panel. And there's like front panel expanders for a lot of the old Roland synths. I had one for the JX3P and the JX8P, where there's a breakout panel that's dedicated to all the functions that you'd have to hunt and peck through parametrically. But here they are presented on, with sliders and knobs. So something like that, where you can plug a bunch of those in, and they're so cheap that you can't afford not to get them. I don't know. I know I've seen kits available and then they're sold out, and the people that were designing them stopped doing so. But it's an interesting, solution to something that maybe not even a problem. I don't know. I just want to talk more about knobs and controls.
I'd like to throw something else in the ring. It's partly so I'm eating humble pie, as I mentioned before we started this madness. My mate Seth gifted me. He's got a couple of TX7s, Yamaha TX7s, and he gifted me one, which I'm very grateful for. And as those who know me know, I hate DX7s and I hate fucking FM synthesis because I'm a bigot. And I love this thing. I think it's 8-bit. I love it. No, Alex, you weren't right. Shut up, Mark. Don't look at me. Don't look at me! Don't look at me! But it's... fuck off, Alex. Just fuck off right now. It's really fun. And I was talking to my mate Larry, and, and he was saying, you can get some really gnarly sounds out of them. And I have since discovered... And it's funny that I put up this face on Facebook last week saying FM DX7 librarians go, and everybody who responded are all musicians I really, really respect. Not anymore though, but so they all mentioned this one called DEXED, DEXED, and backwards it's DEXED. Right? Anyway, what's crazy about it is it's a software synth and it's free. And you can make a sound on it, and then play that on your software. And it's actually got different engines in it. One engine is like a really good 24-bit, so it sounds a bit better. And then there's the original version, because they've tried really hard to make it sound like a DX sound. Then you can get a bunch of sounds and dump them onto your DX, TX, TX81Z, etc. And I just went, wow, that's amazing. So there's something that I'm humble pieing my life away right now with. It's interesting though, it's like because I have this thing with like the Emacs and the fucking emulator, is every time I go looking for samples, like 3 days later and 5 gigabytes, I just go, why did I do that? It's like when you get abducted by aliens or you're in a Blockbuster. And you go with all these fucking, why do I have on Golden Pond? I came in looking for some kind of alien horror thing, and I've got all these new releases, and it's the same thing, and I found myself just looking for all of these sounds, and it's like, I don't need those sounds. Specifically, I want a DX7 with rabies or a Synclavier. And DX7 with rabies is a great name for a band. Or FM rabies. It's a very skinny puppy though, isn't it? Yeah, and it really blows my mind that, and it's built like a fucking brick. I could split a piece of wood with it. Like, it's metal. It's so well made, and it's funny that I just made this realization. I think this is the oldest piece of gear I currently have in this studio. It's older than the Emaxes. Emaxes are 87. Thank you, Vince. Hold on, I'm going to put this, so this is the DX software that I'm talking about. Booyah! And it's great. Go get it. And I'm learning to respect the ways of the DX7. Like, when it's in the hands of a master, it's a terrifying thing, and so I'm eating a bit of ham and pie. Alex, I am going to throw it to you. Go easy with me, Alex.
I think it's great that you discovered FM synthesis for yourself.
Which was released in 1982.
Well, it was discovered in the 50s, so.
Oh, great! I'm trying to move forward, man, and I'm stuck. I can't leave Tom Baker. Go ahead.
I think Dex is a great sounding synth, but I'm sort of offended by the interface, because I think they don't really use the benefits of a software interface, because there are so many little knobs that you have to turn, and you need to understand fully the DX7 to use it, because otherwise it just will be like alien writing to you. Yeah, I wish they would tidy it up a bit and maybe have like draggable envelopes, because I think that's the thing that's most difficult to edit on any FM synth, the envelopes, because it's so important for the tone and the timbre and whatever. And yeah, I got really into FM synthesis in the last month, because I'm nerding out about a producer who unfortunately passed away named Sophie. And she did very interesting things with the Mono machine, which is like also like a, I don't know when it came out, but it's like a really old multi-synthesis digital synthesizer. And she did so interesting things with this really old FM engine. And it's really inspiring, just reading forum posts about people trying to recreate her stuff and trying to get her ideas of sound design into my music. That's has been really inspiring, and I've read so much stuff. Yeah.
Can you put a link?
Check out her music.
You put a link down here, because this could go into a blurb. Did we talk about Delia Derbyshire last week? No, because
she's been mentioned every week, but not in detail.
All right, we
just
always
make sure
go back
she's
to
mentioned
her.
every week.
Always. Got to, and same with Wendy Carlos. Yeah, throw her link in there, Alex, because it could be really interesting. Mark. You're muted.
Oh, there we go. I was just going to comment that, like Alex, I actually have had Dex for a while, but I looked at it and said, no, and walked away. But yeah. Yeah, that's actually why I ended up buying the OP6, because I look at it and I understand what's going on.
Mm. Very cool. Excuse me, very cool. Resi.
On back to the topic of having knobs to control your stuff and coming up with interesting experimental pushing your boundaries. Talk me out of this bad habit, please, where I'll come up with an initial state for a synth, a patch, arrangement of effects and sound sources, and then I'll like stick with that for the duration of the composition or for while I'm jamming on ideas. And maybe there's nothing wrong with this, but then I'll add layers and instruments rather than doing some crazy shit with that one. Can we behave?
It's fine.
Initial idea and like moving on past that. Like I hear this in, just to set up where I'm coming from, a lot of ambient works that evolve over time do have a way of taking an initial idea that's clearly from one tone source, one synth, and then working on it and evolving. And I tend to not do that from the beginning, or I can get very lost in not doing that. Who does the opposite?
Floor is open. Ivan, did you want to? Alex, go.
Yes. Yeah. No. And what I've been doing for a while now is, instead of jumping in and doing sound design and then writing a song based on that, I stick with the basicest of basic patches and get the notes and the playing right, and then swap the instrument out from underneath that and do the sound design, because otherwise I'll just spend all my time doing sound design. But if I'm starting off with what I want, then doing the sound design for the music is working better. And then on the FM stuff, gonna remind everybody that you can still get brand new Korg Op6s, out in the wild for the moment, and the pricing on them has dropped nicely because Korg has bizarrely chosen to discontinue probably one of the best pieces of equipment that they've made in a long time. Like I can't even figure it out. I mean, of their three like Magic Raspberry Pi synths, the Op6 is easily the best of the three. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I love the other two, but the Op6 is amazing. And yeah, they're like, right now they're cheap. I would suggest that in a couple of years they're not going to be cheap, because they're going to become sought after.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I know also you can get a Raspberry Pi 8 DX7s in a box, and people are for like $35. And it's a DX7. Anyway, but thank you for that, Alex.
So what kept me from just laying stuff, I think, is just having started with hardware and having kept that mindset. I started out watching Carl's early Blipwords, where he would just sequence hardware with software, and I just kept doing that, but sometimes the hardware changed to software. And I just keep that mindset. I just do program changes on my software synthesizer. I treat them just like they were one hardware piece, and make automations, even sometimes with MIDI. That doesn't make much sense because the inbuilt automation curve is just more high resolution. But I think that's the main thing that kept me from just stacking stuff, is just treating it as if it were hardware, or just using hardware. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Hey, look, really quickly, if you're on the Twitch, Adam Bomb is bringing up some really great comments here. That's the Zoom link. Jump in. Vince.
Yeah. On the note of building a synthesizer sound and then layering things to change things, and rather than doing that, I have an approach that I use, but it's probably mostly because I don't know what I'm doing really. I take a set of samples that are in the right key for the chord progression I'm trying to use. I start with a chord progression, come up with a basic theory for where I want either a verse or a chorus or a whole song to go, and then I pick samples that match the chords I need to use, and then I adjust those samples to get as close to each other as possible, and then I build the synth sounds that I need to build to fit where I need to fit them in the chord progression, rather than making one synth sound that goes through the whole song. I build everything else out of different samples first, and then I adjust from there, and sometimes I end up just pitch shifting one a little bit and repeating it rather than using an entirely different sample. But that's basically how I've been doing things, at least for the last couple of years since I started using software synths at all. I program that in, and I adjust things in that, and I usually automate it so that the software makes it do it as it plays through the mixing software, so that I don't have to do it on the fly as much. I can stop everything and then adjust a couple of parts where I need it to change, and then it does that. Or I layer my synths already and make two different versions of the synth track with the software synth and have it go back, and it's the same track to start with, and then one of them I add different effects to than the other. And then from there, it lets it go back and forth between the two, or from one to the other, and then to another, and so on and so forth, until you get eventually it's built up. Rather than using the whole, trying to build on the synth track, just use the same synth track, and then just put different effects on your different layers and volume envelopes so that, things fade in and out where they need to. Yeah, so, from someone who has no idea what they're doing and wings it professionally at this point, yeah, sometimes you do better if you start with things that are more varied rather than starting with your one synth sound. And then you can mold everything to fit the sound changes that you already created out of different tracks, and then bringing them closer together in sound with effects and volume levels and panning so that everything works out. So it's relatively smooth out of many very different sources.
Okay.
And then go from there.
Thank you. I just want to really quickly, Adam's saying some great things in the chat. On the robot stuff, I use a lot of things that transform over time. I usually program that stuff pretty accurately, or I'll record audio and then chop up the audio. So I'm not answering your question, Razzie. I'm sorry. It was a really good question, but everybody's been bringing up all this fucking great stuff. It's like, and firstly, one thing I am really trying to do is imagine the song being played by an 80s, maybe 1982 keyboard player with a cape and roller skates, surrounded by a whole bunch of synthesizers. Remember, that person can only be playing, only has two hands, and they can be doing yarn hammer, or they only have two hands, because here's the big chorus sound that's on the Jupiter 8 that I only use in the chorus. Bam, bam, bam. That's another really funny thing. My mate Steve, aka Agent 13, arguably the greatest synth repair caring man in the world, he once said how the thing about Jupiter 8s and Pro 5s and CS80s is they are big, loud, brash synthesizers. So that when it gets to the chorus and you pay that big fucking, he owns several of the and I helped him move his CS80, and it's heavy. Those things weigh like a dead person in concrete. Not that I've ever moved a dead person in concrete. But when you hit a CS80, it's bam. Same with the Jupiter 8. They're very raucous. And I'm trying so hard to say, okay, this sound that I fucking love, it's only going to be in the verse, and it will not be anywhere else. Because it's so easy with synthesizers saying, oh, I'm going to have everything going blah, 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 blah the whole time. So I will end this, and I won't because I never end anything. What are you talking about? What the fuck? Mark, what's going on?
Sorry, I looked up how much a CS80 weighs.
You saw what?
I looked up how heavy a CS80 is.
Yeah, 100 and something pounds.
180.
CP70. Yamaha knows how to make very heavy keyboard instruments. That's one of their big things. GX1, CP70.
They're really fucking heavy. It's a person. And a person who eats a lot of pizza. I have nothing wrong against. And the bad thing about the pizzas, you got to get that all out of the CS80's workings. It's a mess. That's why they're so expensive, because you're paying for pizza. CS80 needs another pizza. Anyway, thank you. You guys are very supportive. Maybe I should do stand-up. No. A song I will always go back to, which is a song that has the greatest arrangement of any song ever written, and you're going to disagree with me, but I don't care. It was 1976, is Wuthering Heights, Kate Bush. Listen to that arrangement. Listen to it, and you've heard the song a million times, and you probably know the dance, and you probably have a red dress. I do. And a bow in your hair. But listen to the arrangement, Rezzy. You don't look impressed right now at all.
You already know I 100% agree. I mean, this is lore. This is table stakes.
This is transfixed. Listen to the arrangement, because it starts with Kate playing the piano. Just the piano. Then, is it 2 violins come in, then a few more, then the bass comes in, then the drums, then an entire orchestra come in, and Kate's gone. It's I'm getting goosebumps. It's so, the thing that makes that song, beside it being a brilliant song written by a fucking 18-year-old, or was she 16? Is that arrangement. And it's so, listen to that bloody arrangement and go, I am going to learn from this. I'm going to emulate this. Another one is, oh my God, it's that hour of the week where I have to bring up Baker Street, like the Baker Street arrangement. And yeah, it's just really important. And then as far as sound design, listen to Delia Derbyshire and just, okay, look, my problem, besides everything in the world, is that I get so guilty. Like, so I got this new little gadget, and I got this software, and I feel guilty fucking around. I feel guilty as hell. And it's like I have to go, all right, sound design is part of the job. It's definitely part of the genre. It's part of the production. And it is important to do this. It is important to create and fuck around with the sound and have fun. It's so critically important. Those sounds have got to be, you know, it's like cooking with garlic. This is making music with fun. You have to taste the fun in this. People were laughing in this when they were doing this. It's fun. Alex.
Yeah, I made the decision for myself to make separate time for just sound design, to try to separate sound design and songwriting. So I will try to set time apart to just make patches on my synthesizers that can save them, and if I can't save them, I just make sounds with my synthesizers and sample them, and maybe make my own sample library and patch library, so when I'm busy I can just pull up a great patch without having to slow down for sound design. That's something that's like my what do you call New Year's resolution, but in November.
Good on ya. Do it early. Turn it into a habit. Make it happen. Vince, what you got?
What I've got is one simple note on your feeling guilty for fucking around. Never feel guilty for fucking around unless, of course, you regret what you find out.
Say that last bit again.
Fucking around is, in fact, how we find out. So never feel guilty for fucking around unless you regret what you find out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really true, man. That's really true. I think there's a lot of people who, you know, call it procrastination, call of whatever you want to call this beast, that puts a block in your head and you can't jump over that block. I believe, maybe a bit too much information, that my no, that's irrelevant. I won't bore you with that. I've got to allow myself to have fun, and I think a lot of other people who do this also need to do the same thing, because it's important. It's really important. I feel like this has reached a very nice cadence. We can go on, or we could bugger off over to MTV TV. Alex, I see your hand. Alex, you muted.
I have a question for Raziel, if you don't mind. I think I've asked a similar question before, but now it's more specific. So I looked at several cameras at the German version of Craigslist, and I realized the digital cameras that are like point and shoot from about 10 years ago are really cheap right now. And I can't afford a nice Sony Alpha something, but I can afford a 10-year-old Canon or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to ask, what are the features that I have to look for, and what lenses are good ones? For example, there are like ones for 12 times zoom and something.
Sure.
So if you would
I got
enlighten
you.
me.
The Canon 60 Mark II is kind of at that sweet spot where its used prices are good. 60 numeral 6 letter D. And then all of the GH, the Panasonic series are good, but that's a different format. But you're already onto it. I mean, I think you're recognizing which ones are at that. These are now affordable, and the Panasonics are everywhere. People use those as crash cams like crazy. So that's not a bad way to get into it. But the question you're asking specifically about lenses is you just have to stick with a format. There's terrific lenses by third parties, Sigma and whatever, for every lens system. Whether you get Canon EF, which there are a few cameras that take, or Micro Four Thirds, which the Panasonics take, and some of the Blackmagics, you'll have a collection of lenses. There's going to be awesome, cheap glass from way in the past on the Canon systems, on Nikon systems, on Sony systems. But it's more about, and you're already tuned onto this, so hopefully I'm just validating what you've gotten into, that at that price point and these used lenses, you're going to keep the value so you can churn the stuff more easily. You know, you'll be, okay, I do like a 12 to 35, or I do like a 70 to 300, but now I realize that I would rather one that's fast and, you know, isn't f5.6 to f11 or whatever, and you want it to be like f1.2 with a wide aperture that gets a lot more light and is more expensive. You can trade up that way. But starting with anything, you can't quite go wrong, since you've already tuned into that, like, I'm buying these secondhand from 10 years ago, and you know, that's awesome. That's the way. If you do get any specifics, feel free to DM me and just to bounce ideas off, or to bring it back next week or now if you have specifics. But
I don't mind at all us having a chat like next week, a conversation about cameras and lenses and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all about it, because we're all trying to make videos and have them featured on MTV TV.
Right.
I have nothing else to say. If anybody else does want to bring something else in, you're welcome to. Otherwise, we're going to raid on over to MTV TV, and I'm going to leave this open, and we're going to sit back here and have a chat. And just remember, Angelspit's Patreon is here. It's pretty much zilch-a-rooney to join. I'm not going to... in a moment, we're going to go to MTV TV, but first, I see Vince's hand.
Yes, just real quick before we go, I want to mention Breathe You In featuring Kimberly from Bow Ever Down. I put the link to the Spotify pre-save in the chat earlier, but it is hitting Bandcamp on December 2nd for Bandcamp Friday, and it'll be available everywhere else December 21st.
All right, you're a bloody legend. Thanks, mate. That's right there. So go get it. Yeah. I just added that link to the Galaxy. Happiness to that Galaxy. Go get that Galaxy. Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for your time. Bless you. Let's go to MTV TV. Diana, let's raid, because there's some awesome music there, probably with DX7s. Bye! Bye. 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 Bye.